We're like,
oh man.
woo!
Yeah.
You guys, hold on, wait.
Thank you and good night.
Yeah, we're the sheer number of technical difficulties that led us to the situation we're in right now.
Yeah, we've actually worked several hours.
You know, Kevin's one of my closest friends, and I think we're closer now than we ever have been. Okay, hey everybody. I hope you guys can hear us okay and see us okay. I hope we're not too out of focus.
Trying not to be too short when I'm sitting
There's no hope for you in that department.
Yes, indeed.
Let's be. Here's the truth. Me and Kevin started trying to figure out the technical difficulties today at 12:05
something like
p.m. or something. So about 7.5 hours ago, we started trying to figure this out.
Venue moves.
So hey, let's say hello to everybody who's here. Kevin can't see, but I can. We've got Ellen Waddell. The Blesses are here.
Good to hear from the Blesses.
So cool.
Ellen.
Alice Chase.
Nice.
Dina says that she's glad that you were smiling in the picture because the rest of us are so serious. We got "I'm gonna take you down" faces. The thing is, Kevin's picture ruined the UFC title fight vibe that me and Isaac have when we do those. Yeah, Alice Chase, thank you. Alice already said before I even said that, MMA fighting. But the other thing you'll notice, two things. One's actually they're both compliments because Kevin in the picture that's the thumbnail for this, he's like trimmed down and gotten pretty buff since then, and his beard has improved immensely. You had like the Amish no mustache beard.
Yes. You mean that it was taken an old picture?
Yes, very old.
I didn't even
picture.
see the promo graphic.
Yeah, Kevin doesn't Facebook.
No.
Ruth Scott is here.
Ruth, got your text. I'll return it.
Alice Chase, I think I already mentioned. Kim Becerra.
Kim.
You guys look great. Thank you so much, Kim. Yeah, hey, Jill Deller, also. Awesome. So cool. I say this every single week, but you guys who are here live make this so much more fun. Me and Kevin were fully intending to talk on Skype the way we normally do. But like I said, a series of comic mishaps that would take more than our allotted time for tonight to recount to you led us to where we are right now.
Though it would be entertaining.
It would be. Well, that would be like a Comedic Errors Thursday,
yes,
not
indeed.
Theology Thursday. Hey, Taya Britt is here. Matea, good to see you. Awesome to see all of you guys here. I think pretty much everyone who's here probably knows Kevin, but if you don't, Kevin is the discipleship pastor here at South Valley Community Church. Me and Kevin have been friends and been in ministry together for...
Dude, you were way young.
11 or 12 years, something like that.
You were playing worship barefoot with short hair.
With a red stripe.
Hair.
I had hair, no beard.
No beard.
I had a faux hawk. This is a true story. I had a faux hawk that was half red. Also, Kevin, Jacob Serpa greeted you super enthusiastically and then greeted me tepidly, I would say.
Best.
So yeah, I'm so excited to get to have Kevin here. Like I said, great friend, fellow coffee snob and theology nerd. So we're going to do one of those two things together tonight. And I wanted to, we've got a few weeks until we hit our apologetic series, and when that hits, it's going to be super fun. We're going to do different content every week that goes with our various, apologetics topics and speakers. It'll be, some of that is yet to be determined, but we have apologetics stuff that's going to happen during the month of August. And until then, we have a few weeks that we're just going to take up with some kind of one-off episodes. And this one is something that was actually, we are going to get theological, but this is a pretty practical one because we want to talk about spiritual disciplines, which are incredibly important, incredibly difficult for most Christians, and for me, and I know for Kevin, and I imagine for many of you guys, whatever kind of good spiritual disciplines and habits you had are probably not as good right now, several months into isolation and sheltering in place, than they were before. I hope and pray that that's the opposite of that is true for some of you, and I imagine that's the case, that some of you are flourishing. In fact, I know even a couple people who I've talked to who are watching right now who have talked about how God is doing great things with their spiritual disciplines. But that has not been the case with me.
Nor me.
Yeah, or Kevin. And man, we're all working crazy hard, and our jobs are weird. We all got new jobs overnight, so life has been super chaotic. Then I threw a newborn into the mix, and So I realized a weakness in myself in my kind of practice of the spiritual disciplines and thought it'd be good to do an episode where we talk about what the spiritual disciplines are and are not theologically, and then kind of talk practically about what has worked for us and not worked for us in the past, maybe things we are planning to do or would like to commit to doing to improve going forward. And so with that in mind, we want to hear from you live too. I can see your guys' comments, and I would just love if you guys have things to add or contribute. Thoughts, input, love to have it. Kim Becerra, Kev, says that she loves Pastor Kevin's devotionals every morning, and she's praying for you too.
Thank you.
Awesome.
I need both of those, actually.
You need YouTube views and intercession before the throne of God.
Intercessory YouTube views.
So I want to start with a quote from Dallas Willard, who many of you, Kevin's got his book right there. Dallas Willard, many of you will be familiar with. He is like the Christian guru of spiritual disciplines. And so his book, The Spirit of the Disciplines. There's another one called The Celebration of the Disciplines. But The Spirit of the Disciplines is like, I would say it's the classic Christian
it's a seminal book on the topic.
And you recently, as I did when I was in seminary, you recently did a course on spiritual disciplines.
Yeah, and hopefully I'll be able to talk about some of the stuff that we did along the way. I think it's really powerful. It's actually one of the things we were trying to integrate. I was already talking to youth ministry about bringing leaders together and doing some of these things in a larger scale, but then the pandemic hit. So, but nonetheless, there's ways for us all to stay connected and disciplined in the middle of this. But like Sam said, I'll give you some ideas of I've had some problems along the way. At first, I think it was just blocking and tackling. We were, like Sam said, I went from reading Analog Church, which was just released, which was about how we need
by
to
our
do,
friend J. Kim.
Yeah, by J. Kim, where we wanted to do everything more analog. We want to keep things analog. It's okay to have digital technology, but the idea is simplicity works. And really, the church has been simple for a long time. And I went from reading that, and I think it was just we were planning the series, and all of a sudden, we're all shut down. So
and we're all digital.
Yeah, so. Exactly. We had to go all digital, so we had to change the game immediately, and that made for some really hard times. For those of you like Kim, you've been watching the devotionals. I've been sharing. It's been a hard road for me along the way. I've been a lot of discoveries about myself, a lot of just introspection, which is good, but actually quite painful. It's a painful thing to really sit and kind of understand what you're really like.
Yeah, and I can imagine of the people watching, both live and watching this later, that a ton of us have experienced that during this time. There's just more time with yourself than you typically get. Yeah. And so you're either filling it all with stuff, which is one problem, or you're marinating in yourself a little more than usual. So well, I'm sure as we kind of talk through a few of the specific spiritual disciplines, we'll get more specific on that. But here's the quote I wanted. This is a classic quote from Dallas Willard. He says, "The disciplines are activities of mind and body purposefully undertaken to bring our personality and total being into effective cooperation with the divine order." That's just half the quote, and we could talk about that for the rest of the night.
Exactly.
They spiritual disciplines enable us more and more to live in a power that is, strictly speaking, beyond us, deriving from the spiritual realm itself. They are, simply put, cooperating with God's desires to transform us into the likeness of His Son. If that doesn't make you want to go read that book, then you are watching the wrong show on YouTube right now. And the reason I wanted to start with that is because Dallas Willard is getting at the main theological point I want to make tonight, which is the spiritual disciplines get viewed as like a legalistic, hyper-religious bunch of performative things that people say you have to do to be a Christian. If you're not fasting and praying and reading the Bible, you're not a real Christian, and it's all about rules and boundaries, and it's not relational. And Willard is getting to the point and saying, no, this is how you cooperate with God's desire to conform you into the image of His Son. So Kevin, I'm just going to give you what I know is a leading question, which is, do you think that the spiritual disciplines are a legalistic thing to ask? We should probably start by saying, generally speaking, the spiritual disciplines are any repeated behavior that we do in order to learn more about God or draw more closer to God. So the famous ones are the kind of big three that we're going to talk about tonight, because if you really get into it, there's list that could be 10 to 20 items
Yeah,
long.
some of them were actually, some of the books I read, someone would have 7 and someone would go to like 15, 16 in their
It's
list.
like the spiritual gifts, right?
Yeah.
So but most of them center around the kind of core 3, which are Bible reading and study, prayer, and fasting. And so, my question for you again is, are the spiritual disciplines legalistic things to ask Christians to do, and do they kill your relationship with God?
No.
All right, thanks for joining us tonight.
No, but I do think there's this, man, especially on our side of the kind of the theological tribes and everything, I think oftentimes you hear the word works and everyone jumps out of their skin, right? And I think the issue is there's some of it's just bad exegesis of particular passages, or just not understanding the words correctly. But at the end of the day, when you love Jesus, it comes with some work, not salvific work. That work's done. That work is absolutely done. The issue is simple. When you love something, you actually do stuff in that direction, right? We could talk about like marriage is a perfect example, right? You brought up a situation about washing dishes.
Yeah, so we were talking about this a little bit earlier, and the thing I was saying is if me washing the dishes for my wife, or me putting my daughter to bed and giving her a break, or fill in the blank, nice things I could do for my wife, taking her out to dinner, those are not the things that make me married to her. And I don't have to do those things to be married to her. Right. My wife would be a crazy person if she said, you can't be married to me if you don't do the dishes X number of times a week. That would be crazy. And that's the way some people treat the spiritual disciplines. But the truth is, it goes the other direction. I am married to my wife, and I do love my wife. So there's no question that I'm going to do the dishes, and I'm going to put my daughter to bed, and I'm going to take her on dates, and I'm going to buy her a present on our anniversary and her birthday. And those aren't things that I do to earn marriage with her. They're things I do because I'm already married to her and I love her. And if I want to foster a closer relationship with her, of course I'm going to do that stuff, right?
Right. It's less about merit and more actually conforming to the very thing that you're in. You are in a covenant, therefore you operate as such. And I think it can even go beyond that, because I know you've told the stories about Sam actually likes washing dishes.
I do.
So you guys know. But there are things that we do for our spouses that may not always be the first thing you choose. In fact, think about it this way. For those of you that are married, the moment you chose marriage, you closed off an entire world. Basically, for that other person, for you and that other person, you shut down a world. And I think a lot of that beginning moment leads to a bunch of things that are like that. You start to recognize what this other person loves, what they care about, what they're passionate about. And there's not an expectation that you are perfectly passionate about all of those things. But to show them that you love them, you're passionate about them. Therefore, you actually give of yourself. You choose to do some of the things that maybe you used to not choose to do. Or you stop doing some of the things that you used to do. One of the famous examples are, the toilet seat, right? That's one of the famous marriage examples that have gone on for decades. But at the end of the day, when you're in such a tight bond with someone, you do things to show that you care and you love them. It's like you're directed toward them in all that you do.
Yeah, and the metaphor, you can really push that metaphor pretty far with spiritual disciplines, because I think there are, you don't want to get into a pattern of doing all these things for your spouse out of like a begrudging obligation.
Right.
But sometimes you do, and I don't think that's bad.
Right.
There are some times when I'm like, ugh, and I do the dishes, right? Obviously there are times when I don't do them when I should, but sometimes I'm like, I don't feel like reading the Bible today, but you know what? This is what I'm supposed to read today for the plan, and if I don't read today, I'm going to have to read double tomorrow. That's a terrible reason, but it's better than not reading. And so I think the point is, and this is what I said at the end of last week's episode about holiness. You don't do this stuff to get saved. That's what works righteousness is. That's what any kind of works justification. That's what legalism is. And so that word, as John Piper says, is a boogeyman in the closet of Christianity. And people say, oh, it's legalism. But it's not legalism to do these things that will draw you closer to God. Jacob Serpa just posted the quote from Paul, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. And he's not saying gain salvation. He's saying, Paul's saying exactly what we're saying. You have this salvation, now work it out.
Right.
Now here's a cool kind of nerdy side note on this verse that most people don't realize. We, because we're American, we read that, and because of how English works, we read that individualistically, work out your salvation with fear and trembling. But like almost every one of Paul's personal pronouns, that's a second person plural.
Right. Anyone from Hollister knows that I use y'all when I actually use some of these words to make sure that y'all know what it's saying.
So Paul is saying, work out y'all's salvation with fear and trembling, which is just a good kind of side note that does matter with spiritual disciplines. He's not saying you, the reader. Obviously, he includes that. That's included conceptually. But he's saying you, as a community of believers together, work out y'all's salvation with fear and trembling. So it's a great verse, Jacob. And so I think, so the two things that kind of we're talking about together here are, the one thing is that get that boogeyman of legalism out of here. That's not what we're talking about. Spiritual disciplines are something that you do to grow in love in the relationship that you already have, to be more and more conformed to the image of Christ. And that has, again, the second piece to it, which is they're a means to an end. They're not just it's not, you don't do them for their own sake. It's not like, okay, you're a Christian, so now you do these things just because you have to.
Right.
You do them for the purpose of what? What would you say are some of the ends that...
Well, I mean, to use the word, I think that Willard used, he used cooperation 2 or 3 times in that quote.
He did.
And it's like, and we think of cooperation probably in a very narrow semantic, but if you think of cooperating with someone, cooperating, we are operating together, that's much of what the New Testament is talking about. It's basically saying you're stepping into the ring, and you're, I mean, the church itself is designed to be the body that goes forth, right? Empowered by his Spirit. It is a cooperation for all intents and purposes. Yeah. So is our personal spiritual discipline.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think cooperation, the other piece of that is it's a good reminder of the fact that this is not something that this is
work
true
up
of
on
all
your own.
Yeah, you don't get... This is why Willard is so brilliant. He's collapsed all these things into that one quote, that when he says cooperating with God, this is about your... working alongside the Spirit. It's like how Paul will say things like, I worked harder than any of them, but it was the power of God at work within me. And so he sees this kind of cooperation language that, man, no, when you do spiritual disciplines, you don't want to fall into either of the traps of, on the one hand, thinking, I have to be the best Bible reader and the best prayer and the best faster, and by my own kind of discipline, I'm going to nail these spiritual disciplines. And you also don't want to say like, well, the Holy Spirit's got it, so I'm just going to kick back and let it happen.
Right.
Those are equal and opposite errors.
And there are both of you that are watching this right now. Both of you are on this. And I mean, some of you should probably, you look to like the Desert Fathers. There were some people that did some really serious ascetic practices early on, and if we went back and looked at them, we would be like, wow, by the faith. But at the same time, you're like, wow, didn't you go overboard there? And I'd argue, yeah,
some of them
absolutely. For sure. Building a pillar and living up there for 30 whatever years, and you're passing things down in a bucket that you want to get rid of, and having
what
certain
things. What are you talking
about? I mean, that's how. I mean, you got to read these stories. By the way, are incredibly powerful. If you guys want to read a book that kind of goes through a summary of a lot of them, it's "Water from a Deep Well." Is a really good book that kind of gives summary of some of these people, because their faith is amazing. The things they chose to do is powerful. But the point is that our motivation. That motivation seemed so core of I must be out of the world and totally separate, that there was something that got lost. And I think we have to be paying attention to that in any one of our spiritual disciplines as well. Because some of us tend to be more like hermits, right? We tend to like to be alone. Maybe you're like, oh, I got to read my Bible today because I read an hour long of my Bible. I'm like, okay, well, have you actually spoken to another person who needs to know Jesus in the last 3 months? So there's a balance that I think we all need to strike based upon our knowledge of ourselves. Right, you know how you tick, and that's important. It's important. It allows you to make decisions on what is right, what is wrong. And I think I ran into a ton of this at first during the pandemic when we started. Man, first 5 to 6 weeks we were nonstop. I just remember being nonstop. Yeah. Every day was a work day. We were up working at night trying to solve problems and all that. And then I ended up having to transfer into school stuff. Everything kind of died down for me. I jumped into school. And, part of me thinks is like, hey, it's seminary. I'm a pastor. I'm reading the Bible. But I wasn't. It wasn't, I was actually in Scripture. But it had a different purpose. It was a bad excuse. I needed devotional time. The bottom line is oftentimes many of us come to, this isn't a Bible, but I'm using it like a Bible. You come to the Bible and you're wanting to learn more about the Bible and not more about who the Bible is about, right? Becoming relational with the King of the universe is the most important thing as we go through Scripture. Prayer, fasting. We're trying to kind of cooperate with that Spirit and be more like our King, right? You walk alongside. Some of them are things that he did, right? Some of them are teaching us to follow his example. There's so many different examples. And I know I got caught up and I wasn't doing much of any. I mean, I was doing my Greek and and it's like, so I was still listening to the word, but I wasn't supping with the King. I wasn't sitting with him.
And that's that means to an end thing, right? So it's like you can read the Bible.
Yeah.
But what
that's
are you?
That's a checkbox. It's a task that's done. And it's almost legalism if you really think about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard. That's one of the weird things about this job that we both have. Is there's times I'm like, I spend the entire day studying the Bible because I'm sermon prepping or whatever. But then I realize I'm like, I have not said a word to God.
Right. Was I with the King in this process?
Not at all. It could have been any book.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
So that's kind of the core of the theological idea about the spiritual disciplines. Is I want you guys to see them positively. Because there's so many of us see them, especially if you grew up Christian, you see them as this kind of like negative thing that's put on you rather than this incredible means of deepening your relationship with God, like Kevin is saying. And so to me, at the bottom level, theologically, just get it out of your mind that this is a thing you have to do because if you don't do it, you're not a good Christian. And put the cart and the horse in the proper order. No, I am a Christian, and why would I not do these things that will allow me to draw closer to the God who saved me?
Yep.
So with that in mind, I just kind of want to briefly walk through the big three of Bible, prayer, and fasting, and talk a little bit more practically about kind of what has worked for us, what hasn't. And then again, like I said, please throw in your own experiences or questions. But we'll start with the big one and the one that I personally have the easiest time with, which is Bible reading and Bible study. I have been really consistent with reading the Bible daily for years now. Mm-hmm. And that's one that just it's natural for me. It kind of matches with my gifting and my interests. It also, this is a deeper conversation potentially, but it also has the greatest potential to kind of play into my flesh in terms of like my arrogance and my desire to know a lot so that I can be smarter than other people and stuff like that. Right. So there's all these reasons why this one is more easy and natural for me. But having said that, on the positive side, and I said this in one of the Bible, one of the hermeneutics weeks, nothing has transformed my view of the world more than regular, faithful reading of the Bible. And so here's my two quick things, and then I'll have Kevin share his. My two big things that I always say are, number one, read the entire Bible. So read the whole thing. Because, so many Christians think they have read the whole Bible who just haven't. Because if you don't do the second thing I'm going to say, you just won't. And the thing I always say, if you've been watching Theology Thursday from the beginning, you've heard me say this before. If you don't read the whole Bible on purpose, you'll never read Nahum. That's what I always say. Because whoever said like, oh, what do I feel like reading next? You're going to read a gospel or the book of Acts, or if you're feeling spicy, you'll read like Isaiah or Revelation or Genesis or something. Or you'll start Genesis and you'll get through Genesis in the first half of Exodus, and then you'll kind of lose track somewhere in the middle of that one. Yeah. And so read the whole Bible, and then the second one is really just an addition to that, which is do it with purpose and with a plan. I'm a big outside resources person when it comes to reading the Bible. Some of you might struggle with feeling like it's not really legit or authentic if you're not like just in a self-motivated way making it happen. I just want to tell you, get on a reading plan. Yeah. There are tons and tons of them available. In fact, Ruth Scott just popped in saying, my regular reading has transformed me. I watched it happen. That's awesome. So cool to hear.
Well, the one thing that I have a little insight into Ruth Scott a little bit here too, which is the thing that you can't miss. And that's that part of that plan is not just knowing what you need to read every day, but having accountability.
Yeah, that's true.
Knowing that someone, and like, I'm going to argue that Sam probably is the type of person that probably needs less accountability. He's got it built into his rhythm now where he just does it. Most of us needs someone there that's kind of just spurring you along,
Yeah,
reminding
buddy
you.
system.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually, it's a spiritual discipline that kind of surrounds a lot of them, is just simply community. And right now we have so little community with our situation. But this is one of those ways.
Yeah, and we know this about Ruth Scott because both of our wives are in a Bible reading accountability group with Ruth Scott.
Yeah.
And so they text each other every day. Done. I did my Bible reading for the day.
Yeah.
That's as far as I know, that's 99% of what that group does, and it's so powerful. Jacob, if I could ask you to just be an informal admin real quick, could you post in the chat a few of the Bible plans that you know that I love?
There's Bible Eater, there's the Bible Project one, right?
Yeah, the Bible Project one's great, the ESV Study Bible reading plan, the 5x5x5. Jacob will post some links. I'm just telling you guys he's going to do that. Yeah, and Alice Chase says she follows the Bible Project daily reading plan. That's a fantastic plan. And the point is, have a plan and have accountability. Because without a plan, dude, you're not going to read all of it. And you don't have to read it all in a year. So different people have different gifting. You can read faster, slower, have better comprehension. Right now, because of how busy my life is, for the first time in like 8 years, I'm actually in a plan that will take 2 years to read the entire Bible. And I did that on purpose because I was like, I could do all the reading, but to actually take it in, I need to slow down because I'm so busy right now. And so whatever your pace is, I know people who have been like, I'm on fire. I'm going to do a plan where I read the whole Bible in 3 months. In fact, Ruth Scott, I think, did that. You can comment whether you finished it or not, Ruth. But I think you did that at one point.
Yeah, I know Herman Hugo did that.
Yeah, Herman did it.
Yeah.
And so there's people like Tim Keller, who's a famous pastor, who reads the entire book of Psalms every month.
Yeah,
which is
he
crazy.
Just reads one a day.
And so I just I want to just encourage you. Yeah, no, it's like
he does the Proverbs.
He does the Proverbs every month also.
That's right.
But Psalms every month is like
that's a lot of Psalms.
What is that per day?
You can only do 119 in one day though. Come on.
Yeah, that's he probably jams through parts. There's 150 of those suckers, so that's a lot per day. So I want to encourage you guys with that, and just to Kevin was saying that I'm the type of person who doesn't need that accountability, and here's what I'll say
for Bible reading.
Yeah, just across the board. Here's what I'll say, even for Bible reading. I will read the Bible every day, but in a self-motivated way. But where I need accountability is with, my wife and I read the same plan together. We've done this this is our 8th year doing that. And we have a way even in the app that tracks it to comment on stuff. And she'll call me out if I'm not talking about it or I'm not engaging with it. Like she'll be able to notice that. So
super good.
I'll look at every word on the page every day. I'll do that. But there are times when I need to be called out to realize, dude, it has been, it's been 2 weeks since I've actually engaged with the text in some way other than just to finish it. Ruth Scott says, no, I did not finish it. I love that honesty. That's awesome. Jill Dowler says she's reading Ezekiel 1 chapter a day at least. Good. Great job. That is one of the top 3 most challenging books in the entire Bible. So
sometimes it's a good choice, by the way, if you get an opportunity. It is just good to find a time every now and then to sit down and read a gospel all the way through.
Yeah, or one of Paul's letters.
Yeah, exactly. Just read it all the way through. Those things, it's just so powerful to get it all in one glimpse every now and then, right? Just you're not needing to do it all the time. It's just really helpful. But I've had I've had the trouble with Bible reading a lot. And again, I think a lot of this led back to when I began seminary. There was so much other reading you had to do. You were already having to be in the text. So it gave me a really powerful both timing and done it already excuse. And they weren't valid. And I started to recognize that the further and further I got along, where was my practical devotional time with God in His Word? And it's really important to do that. I'm going to tell you this too. The thing that has kept me sane over the past just since the pandemic hit has been doing the devotionals. I've got to spend time thinking about the passages, thinking about what would make sense to bring through. And man, even though that can be disconnected, I will tell you, even reading the Bible sometimes disconnected is good. It keeps you in it. There are days when I'm telling you, the Bible's almost like reading, it's like ash in your mouth. You're like, ugh. But if you keep doing it, I'm telling you, those days will not just be there all the time. It just happens.
And there are days where it's honey.
Yeah. Oh, sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, and man, there's to make, like, this is a metaphor I use all the time for spiritual disciplines, and it'll probably come up more than once, but it's gardening. and I'm not the originator of that. I don't know where I heard it first, but all kinds of people say it. But if you want to have a garden, those of you who are gardeners know this, you don't just go out when the fruit is there and pick it and you're happy.
Right.
There's a lot of work all year long to prep the soil, to do the actual planting, to watch them, to keep the different bugs and pests away. And some days, man, you're out there and the sun is shining, you're feeling great, you got your headphones in and it's a blast. And some days it's like the last thing on earth I want to do is go check if all these plants' soil is wet.
Exactly.
Or like go and figure out what's putting holes in my tomato plant's leaves. But if you want to have a good harvest, you have to do it every day. The days where it feels great and the days where it is a chore. And I believe God honors both. So you do want to watch yourself and go like, man, if it's felt like a chore for 6 straight months, come talk to us.
Right.
Because that's not healthy. But man, if you have days or weeks here and there where you're going like, I am dragging myself through Bible reading, or this applies to any discipline, but man, better to drag yourself through it than to just go, I'm not going to do it. This, by the way, if you guys aren't looking at it, even if you're not watching it live, you should still be able to see it. The chat has become an absolute gold mine of Bible reading plans. So look through those. So awesome that you guys are sharing all these. And my personal favorite way to do this is in the Bible app. It's just the YouVersion Bible app. If you put Bible in whatever phone you have, App Store, it's the first one that'll come up. There's a daily tracker that you just check off of what you've read. Super helpful.
Yep.
And you can invite people to read with you in that app. That's how my wife and I can comment on the passages we're reading and see it even if I'm at work and she's at home or whatever. So, anything else on Bible reading that you'd throw in there, Kevin?
No, just do it.
Yeah, read the whole thing.
And the whole thing is important. It's funny. There's so many of you. I mean, maybe not the people who listen to Theology Thursdays, but there's so many of you who call this a church family. Like, you call this home, and I know that you've never gone through the whole Bible. And it's one of those things where I think you're probably still holding on to a faith of your parents, right? You grew up this way. Man, I'm going to tell you, it's so much more powerful when you do it on your own. When you see the beauty of Scripture and how it all fits together, it's absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, and you'll watch in a way that's not even, you can't even tie it to what you're reading. Over time, your understanding of God, what he's like, what he loves, what he hates, what he wants from you, it becomes intuitive. And the only way to do it is to read it. And it's a lifelong thing. It's not like I'm going to read the Bible and then I'll be done.
Right.
Man, reading the Bible is just something we do as Christians. That's why it's a discipline.
Right.
And
that's why it's a canon. It's all one canon, right? There's a lot of different authors, a lot of different genres, a lot of different books, but it's one canon.
Right? And one of the coolest things, speaking of that when you read it year after year, over and over again, you'll just find yourself reading something that you've read 10 times and noticing something you've never noticed. Or, this is my favorite thing, noticing how it connects to a wildly different part of the Bible. You'll be reading and be like, oh my gosh.
That's a link back to this story, right?
I just read that, back in Exodus, this exact same situation happened. And if you're in the right headspace on that day, you go and look at the story and say, how does this connect? And that's, a lot of that stuff, man, is just, I've said this on Theology Thursday a bunch of times, there's no shortcut. No. You just have to be there reading every day.
And one of the good tests is when you hear good worship music, either like old school ones or some of the stuff we do here, listen to the words of the song and you'll start to recognize where they're coming from.
Like, hey, Paul said that.
Yeah, you're like, oh, he's talking about a sheep being thrown on shoulders here. It's really powerful when you start to see these things that are connected in all these ways.
Yeah, awesome. So cool. That's Bible reading. Do it faithfully, do it regularly, and please, man, get a friend or a couple of friends, and please reach out to us if you want help with this. And if you just go, man, I've been beating my head against this.
The Bible. There's also the Facebook Bible reading group. We should probably,
of course. Yeah. We have a Facebook group that you can find on South Valley Community Church Gilroy's Facebook page. That it's private because we wanted comments to be private, but if you ask to join, you'll get approved right away. And it started at the beginning of Shelter in Place. Mm-hmm. And I remember hilariously picking a book of the Bible that lasted the number of days that they said this was going to be. It was like 14 chapters or something. Being like, perfect. And so that has evolved into something that I now have nothing to do with it anymore. Julie Hansen, mm-hmm. who is a longtime faithful member here, she was a missionary in Africa for a number of years. She has taken charge of it. She reads the passage for the day live every single morning. So I know for many people it's just become a beautiful daily rhythm to hop on there, with your Bible.
Yeah, read along with. Listen to what she's saying. Read along with it.
Yeah, it's awesome. So please join that. If that's a great, easy way to start, it's one chapter a day. And Julie does a killer job at picking stuff to read. So that's a great place to start. All right, let's talk about prayer. Because if the Bible is my strongest spiritual discipline, without question, prayer is my weakest. And I'm not being, there's zero false humility here. This is 100% true. I have tried so many different things over the years. It's not always a total failure. I've had really great seasons and really challenging seasons, but on the whole, this has been the, tending your garden in winter discipline for me. Yeah. And I'm talking like in seminary, I took a class that was just on prayer, where they tell you exactly what to do. And I read 5 books on prayer by all my favorite theologians and scholars, and I wrote papers. And
I just did that.
Are you still flying high, or has it already? Listen how cynical.
Well, yeah, no, it happened partially during pandemic too.
Oh,
So I had a full-on extension to finish a paper on prayer and the other disciplines, and I had a retreat. I mean, that's the other thing, man. Personal retreats where you do all of these things together, so good. I mean, just planning even if it's 2 hours. I mean, I would suggest you probably want to go to 4. Right? Find a place where you can go and just be alone. Take your Bible, a notebook, a pen.
And that dovetails with another discipline that we're not going to talk about specifically, but it matches well with prayer, which is solitude.
Yeah.
And that's considered to be its own discipline by most people who write about this stuff. Obviously practiced by Jesus, but solitude, being alone and in silence. And so that's huge. That's incredibly helpful for me. But in general, man, prayer is not, I read the Bible every day faithfully, but it is absolutely a chore and a discipline. I mean, the word really fits for me to regularly, faithfully pray. So Kevin, hold on, let's answer this question. Dina Bless wants to know what time in the morning for the Facebook group. And Michelle Kurzenknabe, Kevin's lovely wife, she responded by saying 7:30 a.m. on the weekends and 8 o'clock during the week. But you don't have to be there live. Yeah, that's a helpful point, Michelle, that she does it live, and it's really cool to follow along, but the videos are there after. So even if you don't see it live, you can still read along with her. What's worked
Bring
for
a
you?
friend, by the way. I think you should do that. Bring a partner to let me know. This is a perfect opportunity. Join that group. Bring someone with you, or pick someone who's already in it and say, hey, I'm going to send you a text just saying, yep, watch the video this morning. I read through the same chapter, that type of thing. It's a good idea, good strategy.
Yeah.
So you're going to,
prayer. What's worked for you? What's been difficult? What's been good?
I think, man, it's seasonal, if I'm being really honest. I've had some really good seasons of prayer, and then I've had a lot of not so good ones.
I can tell when Kevin's in a good season of prayer because I need something from him, but his office door is closed for an hour at a time.
Not really.
Kevin's
That's probably not true.
Again.
Okay, so one thing I will say that it's a help. It's not a guarantee. I made the point a long time ago of posture matters. Actually, I think Dallas Willage is going to talk about posture mattering a bit. Posture matters. So oftentimes a lot of us might pray. We do the kind of throughout the day silent popcorn prayers where we're just throwing prayers up every now and then. There's nothing wrong with that. That's great. It's just like you have quick conversations with a spouse or a child or a parent. That's all good. But there's something about getting on your knees, or on your face for that matter, and praying. You don't know how sometimes that can trigger you into oh my gosh, I just went through a sinful period of whatever, and that's why I should be on my face, right? There's
or
moments,
the glory and greatness of God.
Exactly, you are humbled by the great. I think it's really important. It's not a guarantee, because there are times I still try to do it, and there's some times when I feel my prayer's so short, I just get right up, and it just doesn't feel enough.
But the point is, we are embodied people. We're designed by God to live in
a lot of
bodies.
what he talks about is the fact that Jesus was embodied, you are embodied, and we use it. You don't. Anyway, the fact
that's a great tip.
Yeah, if you are going to really pray, I think you should pick one of your times during the day to get on your knees. Find a favorite chair that you can dig your face to. I grab a couple pillows, put them around my ears sometimes. Sometimes if it's cold, I'll take a blanket and wrap it over myself as I sit at a particular chair. But I just think it's important. Posture matters. I think the other thing that's important, that I don't know how many of you have a mind that's going crazy, if you try to make all of your prayers silent, you're going to go off an edge. You're going to go down tangents. You're not going to stay focused. I think sometimes, no matter how silent or quiet it is, speak your prayers. Sit there and speak them out loud so you can hear yourself. Because I think when you don't do that, there's too much of a chance. We're Americans. We're all about efficiency and effectiveness and busyness. So your mind immediately goes to the 17 tasks you need to get done before noon. So you start thinking about those. And you might throw occasional prayer in like, yeah, Lord, help me with those 17 things I need to get done. No. You need to actually spend time with your King. And I think a lot of times it's just being really thankful out loud. Be thankful out loud. Call out the things that have bothered you last week and say, thank you, Lord. Maybe you haven't revealed to me what that's supposed to stir in me or change in me or something like that. I think it's important that we are speaking these things. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're alone. We're not talking about praying together at this point. You're alone. You can't mess it up.
Yeah. And you're not going to say something that's going to make God go like, wait, what? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, exactly.
You're not surprising.
It's not going to be a doctrinal problem, right?
Jill Dowler said something that leads perfectly. It's dovetails with a couple things I was going to say. Jill said in the morning, the way you start your day makes a huge difference for the rest of the day. I think that's great advice. Make it the first thing you do, even if it's short there. And then she also said, meditation and setting intentions and using the Lord's Prayer as a guideline. So here are a couple of things that have helped me, and when I've done my best, these are the things that have been part of it for me. One is, as Jill said, the Lord's Prayer, when you wake up and when you go to sleep. It's so short.
Easy.
It's so simple and it's so centering. For a while, I had a really good rhythm of every day I would try to focus on a different line or even a different word and think, how does this particular, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done. And be like, what
does that
How
mean?
does that inform the day I just had,
Exactly.
if it's in the evening, or the day I want to have if it's the morning? So that's a simple rhythm you can do when you wake up, when you go to sleep, say the Lord's Prayer to God. And again, sometimes it just feels like, all right, I'm rattling off the words, and sometimes it would be incredibly powerful. Another thing that's been really helpful in times when I've done well with prayer has been having, this is sort of like what I said about the Bible, but having outside help. This is not intuitive for evangelical Christians. We think that prayer is not genuine if it's not just you spontaneously saying something to God. And I wrestled with that for years of like, I'm not going to get a prayer book. I'm not going to pray other people's prayers. How is that? That's not even praying. Meanwhile, that's exactly what the Lord's Prayer is, right? And so I had a great, this great book that I was just rolling with for a while until
meditation.
Yeah.
Thing, yeah.
And COVID just threw me for a loop. And this is my commitment that I'm making before my Theology Thursday friends, is I'm going to get back on track with this book. It's a book of meditations by a theologian from the medieval period named Ignatius of Loyola. And
super good.
It's incredibly good, and I'm kicking myself because I don't have the name of the book right in front of me. But there's a kind of Protestantized version of it that I was using.
And is this Ignatius to do daily office?
He did not do the daily office, but it has a lot in common with the daily office.
Okay.
It's driving me crazy that I can't remember. It's the. Oh my gosh!
Okay.
I'm gonna Google it
We're
the next
live.
time you're talking.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'll post it in the comments because it's an incredible book, and basically he walks you through these things that would have been. And again, this is around the time of the Reformation, so I'll say he's a Catholic theologian, but that distinction didn't really mean anything back then. But it has been kind of reworked for the evangelical, and I'll post a link to that book because I'm terribly unprepared because of our technical problems, and I don't have the author or the book's name in front of me right now. But it's just.
But it's about Ignatius.
It's based on Ignatius's rhythms, and it involves some really close reading of short sections of scripture and imaginative reading where you're trying to picture it and put yourself in the situation. And it's very specific and detailed in how you journal and what you do, and it's the opposite of how I thought I had to pray, because it feels like you're being told what to pray and how to pray. But I'm telling you, this is literally true. The first time I did it, I sat down with this book and I was like, all right, half an hour a day, which is 1/3 of what they tell you to do with this book, by the way. But I was like, let's be realistic about what I'm actually going to get done. And man, the first time I did it, I was in tears
Yeah.
over this. I read the parable of the lost sheep 3 times slowly, and I'm imagining it's like, okay, come on, like I'm not that kind of person. And then I started praying with the prompt they gave, just as kind of a starting point. And I'm like, I'm crying, like it got me. So I'll post this particular book. Thank you, Matt Armstrong. Oh my gosh, the spiritual exercises is what they're called.
Okay, yeah. Ignatius de Loyola. The spiritual exercises.
And Matt, while you're saving my bacon, if you could find the book,
just having him Google stuff.
Yeah, keep Googling, because there's a book. There's a book that's titled, and it involves the spiritual exercises, but it's rewritten kind of for the Protestant tradition. But they are the spiritual exercises. That's what they're called. And so that's just one example. That one's pretty intense because, again, if you're doing it right, you're supposed to have like 60 to 90 minutes set aside for it and stuff. But broadly, my point is outside help. Letting, the wisdom of, Matt Armstrong says, "You're welcome, bro Tato." I miss you, man. I hope you guys are doing well. The first time I met Matt Armstrong, I introduced him to my brother-in-law. And they shook hands really vigorously, and it made Matt spill a full cup of coffee all over his nice white shirt. And so that's my first memory of a full conversation with Matt. Sorry about that. So yeah, but again, my point is, don't feel like it's not prayer if you have outside help. Yeah. Meaning we have 2,000 years of the wisdom and experiences of the great Christian minds and hearts that have come before us. And many of them have things to contribute that we can learn from. And it's just arrogance to be like, my prayers aren't real prayers if they're not. Dude, all my Bible reading is informed by 2,000 years of history.
Right. And I think that's the important thing to remember, is that one of the reasons why meditation is actually, meditation not as though our culture sees it, by the way. Meditation in Scripture is one of those things that keeps us grounded. Because what can happen is, and there are actually a lot of tribes of Christianity that do this, they start to slide off a deep end because they start to get a little too mystical. Like they're no longer grounded by the Bible. So actually keeping in the Bible, or people who are actually pointing you into places in the Bible, is a good thing. Your prayers coming from that is a perfectly good thing, because you have an anchor point. Otherwise, you can get, There are lots of voices out there, right? And that's one way of keeping the certainty that you're listening to the right ones. Yeah,
and what you touched on there too, using the Bible and meditating on Scripture as a bridge, I think, between Bible reading and prayer is a really powerful and helpful thing to do. So you can, if you have the time to pair your Bible reading with your prayer time, this has also been great for me in different seasons, where I'll end my Bible reading with a psalm or whatever, and I'll try to take a line from that and just think about it and deeply and meditate on what this means, and then kind of use that as a bridge to kind of direct my prayers. Okay, my lovely wife, Christina, came in with the save. Sacred Listening is what the book is called. It's been a long day, you guys. It's called Sacred Listening, Discovering the Spiritual Exercises of Ignatius Loyola. So that is the book, and it's great. That's intense, and to be honest, if you are an evangelical like me, it feels weird to start it. But there's nothing sketchy about it. There's nothing weird or woo-woo or creepy. It's biblical, time-tested, and I am going to get back into it starting next week.
You're on.
I've just said that before God and Theology Thursdays streamers. So yeah, prayer, again, I want to say it's a weak point of mine, but I also want to encourage you that adding structure has been the only thing that's helped me again. So having a time of day, Kevin talked about having a place, having postures. Don't just think that if it's not like this self-directed, bubbling over thing that comes from within you, that it's not legit. Because, man, sometimes it's saying, no, I know that I need to pray for 15 minutes today, so I don't care if I don't feel like it. I'm setting the timer and doing my best for 15 minutes.
Yeah, and to throw a caution out there for anyone that's more like me, I'm the emotional type. So a lot of times you approach prayer looking for an emotional event
trying to get a high.
Man, and I think that's wrong. I mean, imagine if you did that with your spouse all the time. It's just not a good recipe, right? So
that's a good caution.
Just be careful of those type of things.
Awesome. All right, we're taking up a lot of time, so we're going to move on. I feel like there's a lot more we could say, but we got to talk about
each one of these could be
its own episode.
Yes,
and it would have been if Kevin. No, I'm just kidding.
Exactly.
No, I think this is the right way to do it, honestly, because I wanted this to be mostly practical because, like we said at the beginning, we got to be doing this stuff. And so I wanted mostly this to just be kind of like a info dump of tips to get you started. The last one I want to talk about is probably the least popular and least understood. So my apologies if we go a tiny bit long, but I want to talk about fasting. Fasting is something that I don't think I understood theologically until like a couple of years ago, honestly. Not that I understand it perfectly now, but I struggled with it. I did it sometimes, but never quite felt like it was accomplishing anything for me or for, my spiritual expression. And so I know many of you, just because I've talked to a lot of folks in our church, find fasting very difficult to connect to understand. And so, I just wanted to share a couple things we've kind of come to. What do you want to say about fasting?
No, you can go to the second, because we probably read the same book about this.
There's a book about fasting that me and Kevin, I think, both read.
We would probably both agree that it's probably the most it feels spot on, and different than what most people think.
And the number of times that I said, "Oh my gosh," while I was reading this book, seriously, just being like, that makes so much sense. Mm-hmm. It's D.A. Carson's book, and it's literally called Fasting. Right? There might be a subtitle, but I think it's just called Fasting. It's part of a series of kind of like basic books, but written by legit scholars like Carson. Again, man, I'm not really batting 100 here, so if you guys want to correct me in the in the comments about the title of that book, you're welcome to do that. Ellen Waddell posted a verse, Mark 1:35. In the early morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went away to a secluded place and was praying there. Yeah, there you go. I mean, that's, if you want something to copy, it's in the morning. He's not laying in bed half asleep. He got up, went and did it. So here's the thing with fasting. I want to also give a blanket caveat. Fasting can be hazardous for people for a variety of reasons, and some of these have to do with physical health. Some of them have to do with mental health. So I do think it's important to fast safely, but you also don't want to rope it off from yourself entirely. I think there are ways to kind of modify your fasting if you have a physical issue. And so, having said that, fasting is the denial of food and or water. And that's an important just kind of blanket statement to make. People, I'm a stickler about this because people will say like, and please give yourself grace if you've said this, because I have said what I'm about to say. And probably everyone who's been a Christian for a long time has done what I'm about to say not to do, which is to say, well, I'm fasting from listening to the radio, or I'm fasting from social media, or I'm fasting from TV. All of those things are wonderful disciplines for the Christian to do, but they are not, by definition, fasting. Those are what we call abstinences. You are abstaining from TV, Twitter, whatever. Fasting, just by definition, is about denying yourself food and drink. And so when we talk about fasting, that's what we're talking about. Abstaining from things can be a great discipline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Super helpful, but I think it's important to shift because of what we're about to say theologically about what fasting actually is, that it's about denying your body something that it needs. It's not about denying yourself something that you like.
Like a pleasure.
Yeah, that's different.
Yeah,
and that could be great, but fasting, the reason that it works, I'm convinced, is because you are actually denying your body something good that it needs. Now, it's not like you're going to fast from sinning or something. You're fasting from something good that's a gift of God that you actually need. And so the big thing with fasting, if I could say it as briefly as possible, that Carson pointed out to me, is that fasting is not just a means to like achieve better prayer or a means to an end in some other type of way. It's not like you're fasting so that you can pray better or fasting so that you can feel a certain feeling. Those things might happen as side benefits, but fasting is itself a form of crying out to God. The thing that I say usually is that fasting, ever since I've read this book, it's whole body prayer. And so it's not just fasting so that you can pray with your mind better. You are actually praying with your body. The hunger pangs will cry out to God. And that's not the way modern Western people typically think. But there's a reason why, and this is what Carson talks about, when you're horribly sad or horribly scared or worried or whatever, you don't feel like eating. There's a natural connection between your body's desire for food and fear, worry, or mourning. And so there's something about that is intuitive to our physical selves. And fasting is, in a sense, putting the spiritual on that. I mean, the best example I can think of is shortly after I read this book, many of you will remember this, we had a situation in Haiti surrounding a bunch of riots and protests that happened there. I don't even know how long ago things are anymore. I think it was about a year ago. And I talked about it in front of the church because we happened to be doing a project in Haiti at the time. And it resulted in our partner in Haiti, Josue, telling me, we have food for the orphans for tomorrow.
Yep.
And I can't get to the stores to buy more after that. And he said that it wasn't about money. We could have gotten them money, but he's like, I can't get to the stores, and if God doesn't do something, I won't be able to feed 25 kids tomorrow. And I just the thought of eating dinner was insanity.
Right.
It wasn't even like I was going, oh, I'd better fast so that God will listen to me more. It was just, this is the most natural way for me to express my and non-verbally. I mean, I prayed a lot about it verbally with tears, but I also just, the hunger that built as I didn't eat felt like itself a physical crying out to God for him to provide for these kids. And so again, I know this is abstract and it's probably weird to think of it that way for many of you, but that's what it feels like to me when it's locked in correctly.
Yeah, and it kind of gets to a point too where if you think about how we operate, we operate in a consumption basis, right? I do this, I get that, and I think too often fasting is probably the easiest one to think you're doing that. Like, oh, this bad thing's going on. I'm gonna fast.
I'm gonna hurt myself bad enough that God will have to
exactly.
Listen to me.
It just becomes an ascetic. It becomes a work. That becomes a work. Like you're trying to treat God like
it's
a
magical.
piñata.
It's magical.
Exactly. And that's not the intent at all. The point is that it's almost like it's a collective mourning. You are grabbing a hold of an event, and you literally living into it by not eating and not drinking.
And something we're circling around with that, and this is another point Carson makes really well in the book, is that biblically fasting is almost always, if not always, associated with negative things. Meaning it's almost always about something horrible is about to happen, or something horrible has happened. It's mourning, or it's desperation, or it's fear. And he's saying this is the response to these things. So, COVID could be something absolutely worth fasting over. The state of racial tension in the U.S. is something worth fasting over. You name it. We got a lot of them. But he's saying, and he's not saying don't fast about other stuff, but he's saying biblically, the pattern is you fast when the enemy is at the gates and the city is going to fall tomorrow. That's when you fast. You fast when, you just lost a loved one and you are in absolute misery. Yeah. And it's kind of like trying to, again, get a spiritual connection to that, that kind of thing that happens naturally when you experience grief and fear.
Yeah. Yep. And I mean, if you look at the Bible too, it wasn't just Israelites that fasted. I mean, it was a common thing, right? It was something. I mean, you read Jonah.
The Ninevites are fasting.
The Ninevites' cows are fasting.
Yeah, the cows fasted.
The cows fasted.
Talk about that till the cows come home. Alice Chase has a great question about fasting. She says, how often should we fast and when? What are your thoughts on that?
Man, okay, so I'm going to tell you an experience I had. I mean, it was okay. It was quite a few years ago. My brother and I, we made an agreement that we were going to take a whole year and we were going to fast every Wednesday. So from sundown Tuesday, or basically from dinner Tuesday night until breakfast on Thursday morning, we just wouldn't eat. We'd have water. We might have allowed coffee. I can't remember. It wasn't in my coffee snob days, so that would have been less important.
You're just throwing a pot in the old Keurig.
But I'd call it mixed results. I mean, granted, we gave each other, there were days we'd tell each other when we weren't doing it because we were both in business that required us to entertain, and we didn't want to go to, if I travel to Ireland and I'm entertaining someone, I can't not eat in front of them. It was one of those things where, so we would balance it out. But I'd say probably 75% of the Wednesdays of a year, we did it. And I look back on it and I realize what it became. One thing that can happen is if you plan something so consistent like that, you do have to be careful of what it becomes.
Yeah,
right?
There's rote.
Yeah, exactly. You can drive it into a rote position. So to say how often and that type of thing, man, if you really think about it, if it truly is something that's about more of mourning or just kind of, it's almost like feeling the groaning of of all of creation and kind of joining in with it.
Yeah.
That's something you could do anytime because there's stuff that's bad going on a lot. But I don't know. I don't think my Wednesday experiment was very good when it came to fasting overall.
It seems like the natural and biblical way to do it is to do it in response to situations.
And I think response to is a perfect word.
Yeah. Right? That it's like something's coming or something just happened, and this is the way that I am pouring out before God in a way that transcends words.
Exactly.
It doesn't replace words. Again, it's not like you don't pray when you're fasting.
Yeah.
And I do think you have the side benefit of clarifying prayer and of reminders to pray when you feel a hunger pang and you go, Lord, I want to desire you as much as I desire food right now.
Absolutely.
But the fasting is the thing. That's the key. That sounds so simple, but that's what Carson's book taught me, is the fasting itself is the thing. And so I think that can happen seasonally. I'll be honest with you guys, I had a period of time where when I first began preaching regularly at our Hollister campus, I started preaching at the first service super regularly, and that felt like a really weighty thing to me, that role of preaching the word as part of my regular life felt really heavy because there's a lot of biblical warnings about it to like, hey, be careful if you do this. You get an extra judgment and stuff. And so in response to that weight, I fasted 1 day a week, sort of like what Kevin said, for a number of months. And it sort of petered out naturally. But I wanted once a week on Monday to just express physically how serious this is to me and how much anxiety I had.
In response to the weight of what was being laid before you.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so for me, it's mourning, it's fear, it's when you, and again, I'm not telling you what to do, but this is how I think prayer should work. When you get a phone call about a family member or a close friend's cancer diagnosis, that's a good time to fast. And again, I think most of us will feel an intuitive connection to that you don't want to eat that minute. You know what I mean? You're about to go out and have a nice dinner and you get horrible news about a friend or a family member. The last thing you're going to do is go eat, right?
So that might be a good triggering point, is to simply say, when you reach one of those moments, plan for it to go longer than just the feeling of the event, if that makes any sense. If you deal with a death in the family, and you do, it's true, you feel less like eating, right? If you have a really stressful event that goes on at work, you feel less like eating. Offer it to God. Basically what you're doing is you're redirecting that internal biological thing that's going on, that's got your emotional, everything going on with it, you're redirecting it toward God, right? Because you take the prayer and fasting and you jam them together, and hopefully some Bible as well to use the triumvirate we're using here.
Yeah, triumvirate. It's Kevin's special right there. Yeah. I get made fun of for making big words, but that's a big one. The only time I've ever heard that used is the three people who tried to conspire to get the Caesar into power. That's how nerdy we are.
Yeah, he is very nerdy.
So the thing there that I think is beautiful is it matches with what Kevin said about postures in prayer. There's something that transcends your cognitive communication when you fast. And modern Western people, you just have to know this about yourself. We think that the only thing that matters is what's happening in here, and our ability to express it in words or thoughts.
Right.
And that's just not how human beings work. You know that because in relationships that are in a beautiful, positive way, you have stuff that absolutely transcends words. The way you feel when you hold someone's hand or give somebody a hug. I mean, you can't
see a newborn baby.
Yeah, see a newborn baby. I haven't done that in, it feels like 3 weeks have gone by since I saw a newborn baby. And so I think that's sort of what fasting is tapping into. Yeah. Is it saying, again, praying with your body, usually in desperation or fear or anguish to just cry out to God. And so I want to encourage you to read that book if this is something you'd like to kind of take more seriously, or consider adding fasting to your life as something that is a response to that sort of event. And again, there are some of us who have to be smart with how we fast for a variety of reasons. If you have mental or physical reasons why this is not a safe thing for you to do, and don't just jump straight into I'm going to do a 7-day, no food, no water. Try something small. Be like, I'm not going to eat dinner. So I'm going to go to bed a little hungry, and I'm going to wake up and I'm going to break my fast with Thanksgiving in the morning, or skip lunch or whatever. Be smart, be careful how you dial into it. I think for the average person, a really safe and healthy way to start is a sun up to sundown, approximately 24 hour. You could even eat dinner and then eat dinner the next day, kind of a thing, if you're nervous about it. But yeah, dip your toe in. Don't go straight to a 50-hour fast or something like that. But consider it. I actually think fasting in the modern world is a neglected discipline that's very powerful.
Well, it's a neglected discipline in our faith. There are a lot of people that are actually fasting now.
It's true.
Fasting in our culture is becoming kind of cool.
It's true. Intermittent fasting. I did it for a long time.
I still kind of do it, but it's a different thing. Again, and I think that just goes to what we're saying is that fasting has a purpose and a direction, and I think that's important to keep at the center, because you can't just fast and think it's a Christian discipline. It's more than that.
So there's a lot more we could say. But we're over time already, so we're gonna call it. And I just want to, again, as a broad statement, say, do not fear the spiritual disciplines. These are a means that God has given you of growing in your relationship to Him, in your obedience to Him, and they are good for you. So whichever ones you've been neglecting, or maybe you've never done, consider adding in a rhythm to your life of doing these things. Baby steps. If you're not praying right now, don't jump into an hour long a day. Start with, I'm going to say the Lord's Prayer in the morning and the evening, and maybe I'm going to set aside 10 minutes to pray. That's awesome.
Yep, exactly.
You've never read the Bible before? Don't try to read the whole Bible in a year. Try to read the New Testament in a year. Or just say, I'm going to read a chapter of the New Testament every day. Just baby steps. Do something that you will succeed in and not burn out on. But don't neglect them. They're incredibly powerful and transformative for you.
Yep.
Anything else you want to say, Kev?
I can end with an anecdote.
Heck yeah.
All right. I'm anecdoting away. I actually have a good friend whom I miss already. And one of the things, he had a really good thing that he did. He literally, in the middle of his day, he set an appointment in his calendar for every work day that was DYTTL. Do you trust the Lord? And it would pop up every now and then. But here's the trick. It was on his corporate calendar. So people would ask him about that little thing. And it was just, it's just a super powerful thing. And he told me honestly, he's like, yeah, it doesn't work every time. Sometimes this work is so busy that I can't get to it. But I've tried doing it, and it's been mixed results. But it's ideas like that. Don't be afraid to use technology to remind you to pray, to remind you to read your Bible. That's fine. Use apps for the Bible. It's fine. Just, we want you to do it. Find whatever works for you. If you're totally anti-technology, don't use technology. You don't want anything to be impacting the goodness of these things.
Yeah. Hey, awesome. Kevin, thanks for being here, man.
I appreciate being here.
Did you appreciate how I took your entire workday figuring out how to do this?
It was awesome.
It was a good day.
Yes.
Now that it's over.
Yeah.
So, hey, appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for being here. We'll have a couple more weeks of just one-offs. I think next week we're probably going to take a look at whether or not we should ask Jesus into our hearts. Spoiler alert, it's complicated. So we're going to do a couple of one-offs. Then in August we'll have apologetics. So please come back live next week. Kim's saying thank you for all you do. Thanks so much, Kim. I appreciate that. And we appreciate you guys being here.
Absolutely.
And we just cannot
We have
wait.
felt the love in the middle of non-community. We've felt the love. We hope you guys have too.
And that's true for the whole church staff, by the way.
Absolutely.
All of us, we feel your guys' support and presence. So thank you.
Yeah.
And man, we just can't wait until we're all together our hands up, praising God in the same room. So until then, love you guys. Thanks for being here. Have a great night.
Bye now.